Okay, so the Pareto improving allocations. The other point about the gray points is none of the gray points are on the demand curve. That's another difference from Pagoo. Pagoo's point was on the demand curve and in the high price direction. So Pareto improvements means we're going to go off the demand curve and we're going to have lower average prices and greater marginal prices. Actually, today we're going to have 4 prices. This is price theory, right? So you guys can juggle prices, I hope. We're going to have 4 of them, but already we have 2. The average price is the one that I drew these indifference curves for, both parties. But the marginal price is the marginal value at whatever quantity we have. So Pagoo gets the right marginal price, but the wrong average price. And it's the average price that makes for the huge conflict. I saw a hand and then it disappeared. Yeah, okay. Okay, so we got that from that picture. Now let me go back to the flatness part. In the textbook, we call this the nudge, and why a nudge is an implication of economics. Before I said, well, anywhere you move to the left or to the right from you, the consumer is worse off. But not a lot at first, because by definition, his point on his demand curve is where the marginal value of a little more of this good is identical to the marginal value of a little more of the other goods. So you asked me to give up one of this good and have one of the other goods. What do I care? I mean, I was indifferent. And so that's why the indifference curve gets flat up there. And the more direct result that we're going to use is to move the consumer, and Murphy is going to do this tomorrow as well, to move the consumer off his demand curve a little bit. It's pretty easy. You were asking before, and we were saying, well, you have to bribe the consumer to get him to do something different. You don't have to bribe him much to make a small change, because he's at more or less indifferent anyway. Yeah.
So on that point, if we have a marginal effect cost which is not horizontal, this is due to some tangency condition. Like, would that mean that our indifference curves now have a non-zero gradient at the intersecting view?
Well, if we don't want to get into monopsony and things like that, it would still be a tangent. There would be some supply curve at the market level, but the individual still feels like, well, I can buy as much or little. Unless it's a monopsonist, then that could get interesting. And Murphy's going to do that tomorrow, more on the monopoly side, but it's symmetric. And you can do some cool stuff with that, but I don't. What's that?
It's a very analogous argument that around the point of view, the utility differences are small. So
Yeah, I mean, we have that in optimization and all kinds of things. We just need a certain smoothness there. And that's true in engineering and all kinds of things, health. It's not just economics, but we have it in economics too. So the fact that the consumer can be moved a little bit off his demand curve quite easily, and the fact that we said all the Pareto improvements are off the demand curve, then one of the predictions we have is, boy, we should expect to be off the demand curve, at least a little bit. In particular, in the direction of the gray area that I show, we should be off to the left. A little move to the left hardly harms the consumer and gives a big benefit to the other guys. So we kind of expect that. Now, what Coe said in his other paper about social cost, he said, well, maybe we should expect them to get all the way to the efficient quantity. And I'll show you, we're not going to go that far today. But we're going to say we ought to be going in that direction. Well, if we're not going that direction, I guess as social scientists, we'd ask, well, what's the problem? It looks to us like there's very little cost of moving off the demand curve, and there's a lot of benefit. Why isn't the market moving off the demand curve a little bit? At least a little. I'll at least ask that question. Okay, so